Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 368 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am the Orange Tank. I am your host this episode, and with me, as always, are Mark and Callan, the Red and Green Tanks.
Hello. He took water.
You said that
and
the
I
wrong
now
way.
get to talk more. Oh, what?
Yeah,
I did it the wrong way?
Yeah, you said it. You said Mark, and I can't remember if you said Mark and Callan or Callan and Mark, but then you reversed the tank color order. So if this is somebody's first time,
like something. That doesn't sound like a mistake I would have made.
They're going to think that I'm somehow the red tank and Callan's the green tank, and that's going to be
true.
Confusing. So you've confused all the new listeners.
Well, I did recently have a newish friend listen to an episode. Well, to be fair, they wanted to listen to an episode after they found about the podcast. And they listened to the whole thing, like, it was great, except I couldn't tell which voice was yours. And I wasn't sure
That's crazy.
what to make of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is maybe the worst thing anyone has ever said to me.
Excuse me?
To suggest that I was confused with your voices.
Wait, that's the worst thing? I would say that's the
Worst
oddest thing because you have, I think, the most distinct voice of the three of us.
That's why.
The best thing that's happened to you this month.
I've definitely heard that people can't separate our voices or can't tell who's speaking, which also strikes me as odd, especially with Nealon's unique of the three voices. But I don't know if your voice being indistinguished is worst or weirdest. It strikes me as more weird.
Definitely weirdest. I think that's definitely true.
He's like, he's so progressive that he can't hear your accent.
Exactly. He doesn't hear color. Okay, this week on the show, we are going to, don't say look back, we're not looking back, but we are looking before a certain period of time.
I'm out.
Not yet. You don't get to
Okay.
make that joke just
I'm not
yet.
there. Okay.
We are going to be looking into the past and doing an evaluation on games that came out more than 10 years ago and asking ourselves the very hard question. If we were being honest, if we were being really truthfully honest with ourselves, and these games released in 2026, would anyone care?
Scary.
That's coming up in the second.
Scary
That is
thought.
a scary thought. Scary thought.
Think about that.
That is coming up later in the episode. Before we get there, we're going to be talking about some of the games that we've been playing. And this week, Callan's
I'm out.
out. We're talking about I'm out. I'm going to be talking about Evenglow.
Isn't that a song by Pearl Jam?
You know what? It might be. That could be.
I think it's Even Flow, but whatever.
Even Flow. That's what it is. I knew it was right there on the edge of my brain. But yeah, Even Flow is not what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about Evenglow. Mark is going to be talking about Trials of Maya. Let's start with Callan.
I'm out.
Okay, I thank you. That's all I wanted.
To be clear, if you said, Callan, be economical, you know what I mean? Like, and if we weren't trying to fill a podcast, which we are trying to do, my review of the game would literally be, I'm out. And then I would stop and make you move on. You know what I mean? And I feel like in a former world, I'm out is a redo of a card game called 13 Leaves, which Nealon pointed out before we started is a very new game, 2025, and has been redone into the Magenta line of games, which is the unfortunately sized and... what's another word we can use here? These are the big box pink games that are all magenta. Some of them look nice.
Others.
I would say that the series is misguided.
We've spoken about this a lot. Just it's an awkward thing to make small card games in big boxes, right?
It's like I have 4 different versions of No Thanks. So I bought the new version of No Thanks. And, half of the table that I played it most recently with is like, why is No Thanks so big? And why is it so pink? And, it works. Okay, but I'm out does not work.
No thanks.
Okay, so it is a ladder climbing game where you are building on a number array in the center, where if there's a 5 in the center, you can either play lower cards to the left or higher cards to the right. The wrinkle being that you must play as many cards as are already in that side. So if there's 2 4s and a 5, in order to play 3s, you would have to play at least 2 3s, or you could play 3 3s, or you would play on the other side of the pile where you'd have to play one less card. and you're trying to get rid of all your cards. When you can't play, you pass. And that is essentially the entire game. That's it. The distribution of cards is not the same, as in there are only 2 1s and 2 13s, but there are 8 7s. So there's much more cards in the center. It is a very simple shedding game, and it wasn't bad. Like, that isn't the review. The review is just like, I kind of feel like I need to do an audit of this genre of game right now, because I was just kind of looking over my collection, and you've got Denup, which we recently covered. You've got Scout, which is Bonafide. You've got Hachi Train, which became Hungo, which became Nara Dori. You've got on the heavier end Panda Spin and Haggis. On the lighter end, you've got Penguin Party. You've got that. What was that one? That one that I really like. 5-3-1, 5-2-1.
Oh yeah, 5-1-1.
Yeah, Delt fits into this category. Maskmen fits into this category. There's just a lot. 5-3-5 fits into this. Actually, I think 5-2-1-1 does not fit into this category, and 5-3-5 does fit into this category. You've got Of What's Left. So it's just a very again. If we're comparing it to Trick Takers, which they're all the same thing. All right, guys, you heard it here first. They're all the same thing. I don't know. I just am a little like, it's hard to recommend one over the other. This is not one that I'd recommend. Oh, we covered Ghost Lift, another recent shedding game that's quite cute. Bridge City Poker, don't play it. Spring Cleaning, another one we covered. Planet Etuk. Like, there's just a lot here, and there's not a lot that differentiates them. This one, it feels a little differentiated in that you're playing on the center pile, either up or down, and maybe that's more similar to Ghost Lift now that I say it out loud. But this is just fine. But this is in a big box, and it's being magenta prices. We can't afford magenta prices in 2026. And it takes up too much space on my shelf. That's my review. But maybe, actually, we could put timestamps if someone wanted to just do the first part of the review. Remember the I'm out part? And then we could fast forward, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So this is what we'll do. If you want to skip past my full review, please skip ahead to... And then, Mark, you do your impersonation of my voice. No one can tell the difference between our voices.
Yes,
so it won't even matter. So after you cut the episode, then you just jam it right in there, and then boom.
Okay,
I'm
so
out.
You're saying what you just said, I'm going to cut and put at the beginning, right after you said
make
I'm
it
out.
good.
But make it good.
Yeah,
I'll
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
But then you'll make it, and then no one will know the difference, and you can just say, yeah.
We'll trick them all.
They'll never know.
They'll have no idea.
All right.
It turns out that I have played this game. Just
13 Leaves.
Well, no. I played the magenta-ized I'm Out version back about 6 months ago. I had no recollection of it, obviously, because when you said I'm covering I'm Out, I didn't think I'd played it, and then I found out I had. But looking at pictures, it does ring a very faint bell. I remember it being completely sort of innocuous, and I remember thinking, this is okay, and then... Obviously not ever thinking of it again because I didn't remember anything about it. But yeah, I definitely don't think it warrants, and you're showing the box now to us, it doesn't really warrant as big a box as it is. If this was a game that was on a playing card size hanger at a grocery store or something, that was $5, then sure. Then this is a game you could play with family and friends in 10 minutes and be fine. But I don't think it warrants a big production.
Yep. And I don't even hate the card art. There's the psychedelic card back and sort of...
I don't like it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think this is unfair a little bit because I'm looking at 13 Leaves and the new one side by side, and 13 Leaves is lovely.
I didn't dislike the art, but I think we're well past the I'm out part of the review, and everyone's going to skip ahead anyway, so they don't even need to listen to what we're saying now.
Okay, you want to just say it one more time?
Do you need me to?
Maybe not, I guess. Okay.
I'm out.
Thank you. I have been playing Evenglow, and this was sent to us as a review copy by The Op. This is a tile laying game, and I do want to start, and I don't want people to think that I'm starting here because the game itself is bad, but the production values on this game, oh my goodness. Lovely art, beautiful little game. I don't know that I've seen this before, but these tiles are this lovely thick foam core with very silky smooth card on the top.
My favorite kind of music.
Just...
My favorite genre of music is foam core, by the way.
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's why this resonates so much.
Sure.
That was Soundgarden's thing, right? Was foam core?
Are you guys talking about
100%
music?
sure that foam core is something I made up right now.
No, I know.
Okay. Oh, okay. You were trying to run with it.
Okay, never mind. But beautiful game, lovely production, stupidly thick, glossy boards. The premise of the game is that you're drafting these tiles, these lovely thick foam core tiles. You have on your turn a card that has 4 of them on it. You're going to choose which way you want to rotate that card, take the 2 tiles on the one side of the card, and then everyone else at the table takes the 2 tiles on the other side of the card. So it's a little bit of that roll and write adjacent kind of thing, where what you're choosing dictates what everyone else gets and vice versa. And then, here's the chief gimmick. The 2 sides of your board are like a mirror image of one another. And if you place one of the tiles in a spot on the left board, you must place the other tile in the corresponding mirrored spot on the other side of your board. But this is kind of like a Calico Harmonies-esque type game where you're trying to build these quite specific patterns and arrangements and things like that. So it quite quickly becomes potentially brain burning. Well, like, okay, if I place the red one here, then I'm going to want the green one on the left side in this mirrored spot on the other side of the board. And the reason all of this is important is because the arrangement of these tiles is worth points. Like the green tiles want to be next to each other to create like big clusters of vines. The red tiles want to be in pairs. The yellow ones want to be in groups of 4 and so on. And on top of that, there's this extra little element where if you get them in very specific arrangements, you get these potion cards, which are special powers that you can use to like move stuff around your board. So lovely idea, potentially very brain burny. I found it kind of boring, to be honest. It has all of the things on paper that I kind of think would be such a Neelan-y game, and down to like the art and the production values. But even within like the first, we played a few games of this back to back to back. And with the first game, I kind of felt like this feels like it would kind of get repetitive and isn't as challenging as I'd want it to be. Because, when you invoke stuff like Calico, famously quite challenging despite how like soft and lovely that game looks, this kind of felt like it was really easy to get all the things I wanted going, despite what on the surface felt like a challenge. And at that point, it just kind of becomes boring. And the action selection is itself just choosing which side of a card you want, which is equal parts kind of a dull decision and also not as potentially interactive as it could be, which is to say that there's very little interaction in this game, especially if you're playing it multiplayer. Like the idea that you would try to rotate the card in the perfect orientation that benefits you and hurts as many people at the table is barely there, so most of the time you're just focusing on what you need, in which case what everyone else is doing is kind of secondary to what you're doing, if you're paying attention to it at all. And by the time we sort of got around to the subsequent games, that feeling bore out, that it just wasn't presenting anything interesting from game to game to game. So overall, I would say pretty disappointed with Evenglow. This is a pretty flooded sector of the market right now, this kind of like light, cozy-ish tile laying game. And this is definitely not one that like rises above the ranks, despite really, really being lovely and tactile and beautiful to look at, unfortunately. That is Evenglow by the Op Games.
I got a chance to play a review copy of Trials of Maya. This is going to be, I think, on GameFound a little over a week from when this episode releases. So if you like what you hear, you can check that out on GameFound. This is published by Department of Lore and designed by Anand Gandhi, Ayush Asthana, Zain Memon, Yash Patel, and Ahan Saho. Many of these designers worked on Shasan and Shasan Azadi, the latter of which, Shasan Azadi, was a very interesting game that I reviewed back on episode 331. All this is to sort of point out that this seems to be a fairly close-knit, collaborative design and production team, I think. I mentioned all that because the thing that I really felt upon opening the rather large box this game came in is that passion that you might get from a design team like this. Now, I think in the majority of cases with game design in general, and particularly with independent crowd-funded games, passion is probably a requirement to get one of those over the line. And I think in many cases with those games, you can feel that passion. But I think this is especially true with Trials of Maya. And it hit me as soon as I opened the box. Now, I don't know if this is going to be true of the crowdsourced edition. I suspect it will be. But the first component that I pulled out of the box when I opened this box up was a full-on hardcover book set in the world of Trials of Maya. So it's like a full-fledged hardcover novel that was part of this thing. I can't say that I've read it, or if I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know if I ever will. Though, according to a little blurb on the cover, there's apparently an audiobook version that's going to be voiced by Hugo Weaving in the works. So I may check that out. That said, this book is like on Goodreads and has a bunch of reviews, so it is a legit book. So there's something to that. And I'm bringing this up because it's something I've become a little cognizant of more recently, because as an aside, I had like a family friend come visit, and they had a kid with them who was into video games, and I got to talking to him about what kind of games he's into, and he mentioned that for him the number one thing is like a good narrative or a really good story. And I don't know if that's necessarily as big a thing. I suspect it's not in the board game world, but I'm sure there are people out there who are looking for a game that has a more immersive experience. So if you're looking for something along those lines, I'm just saying this to point out there's a lot of meat on the bones if you're interested in that. Anyway, let's put the lore aside for a second and talk about the game itself. Trials of Maya is mostly a MOBA style game. Think of video games like League of Legends or board games like Guards of Atlantis. These are games, if you're not familiar, where you are trying to often take over an opponent's base while dealing with pesky minions, like smaller creatures that are sort of in your way. And in that respect, Trials of Maya is similar, both in its 1v1 and 2v2 mode. So those are the two like primary ways that you'll play the game, either one-on-one versus an opponent or on teams of two. There's also a free-for-all, every player for themselves version of it, but I don't know if this feels like the ideal way to play it, at least in my limited experience. There's a lot to this game, but in what will probably be a fairly big nutshell, I will try to sort of sum it up how the game works. Each player is going to be in charge of an asymmetric hero, and while there are only 4 that came in this preview edition that I played, the 4 were quite asymmetric. According to designers, there are going to be more available as this game is crowdfunded and released, but the 4 itself that came in the game, while the rule sets for all the characters are basically the same, and sort of like if you know how to play one, you basically know how to play all of them, in practice, as you play the 4 different characters that I played, they do feel quite different, and that made it quite interesting. When I played with one, it was a much different style I found myself playing than playing with the other one, so that was appealing to me. But how do you play them? Well, the core of the game centers around what I have to say is my favorite bit, which is this card management system. The way it works is you're going to have a 3-slot tableau in front of you that you're going to fill with cards. Each card has a cost, a number of actions that are printed on it that you're going to be able to take if you pay the cost, and then this energy value on the bottom. You're going to play a card every turn, and as the card comes out, there's like a 3-card conveyor belt in front of you. Whenever a card is kicked out of that conveyor belt, whatever that energy value is that was printed on the ejected card, that is going to be the amount of energy or the amount of like points that you're going to be able to spend in activating the other 3 cards that are left over. So if I have 3 cards on, whatever card gets kicked out, whatever that number is, that's the value that I get to spend on the 3 cards that are currently on my belt, and I spend them to fire off as many cards and many actions as I want, or as I can. There's also a really elegant initiative system, which is based on that energy rating I was talking about. So whenever you play cards, you're going to play cards face down simultaneously, and you're going to reveal them. Whoever's card has the lowest energy value is going to be the person who goes first, and that is a big thing in a lot of this game. You're going to want to go first often, but you're balancing that with the idea that, yes, I'm going to be playing this low energy value card now to go first, but when that card eventually gets ejected from my little conveyor belt thing, I'm not going to have as much energy to spend on actions at that time. Another thing that's sort of interesting is the take on minions in this game. I haven't played too many MOBA games, be it video games or board games myself, but my understanding is most of the time minions are sort of like a bothersome thing that you're trying to just sort of get out of your way and not really like too consequential. In Trials, it feels a little different. You're actually going to be looking to take them over and control them throughout the course of the game. There's also a really interesting aspect of the game where whenever you deal damage to any minion throughout the course of the game, you sort of build up a reservoir of health that you get to assign to your own minion whenever you spawn them. So you can do a bunch of damage over the course of the game, build up this huge reservoir of health points, and then when you spawn a minion, assign a bunch of health points to it, or assign 1 health point to it, depending on what you're trying to do. And each minion that comes out has its own sort of like abilities. There's a lot more. There are these cycling objective cards that are going to be coming out throughout the game that are going to grant experience that you can use to upgrade your character in a bunch of different ways. Each character has some things that they all can increase, like the amount of health points, these little tags that the cards are based on. Like some cards will get stronger based on the different tags you have. You can assign tags to when you're upgrading your characters. And then all the characters will have specific character traits that you can activate and upgrade. which is, again, ways to make them quite asymmetric and interesting. The gameplay itself and the combat is very straightforward. This is a completely deterministic system, no dice rolls or anything like that. And it's pretty simple to figure out how the combat works. It doesn't really grind things to a halt at all. There are bonuses for stuff like being on higher ground that initially when I read that in the rules kind of worried me, like how all these modifiers is going to be an issue. But thankfully the rules are pretty simple, relatively simple for situations like that. And a quick shout out while I'm talking about the rules for the rule book. Very clear, very colorful. I found it very helpful. The player aid also really helpful whenever we found ourselves getting stuck on something. So that was also quite good, especially for a preview copy. Also, another big thing to mention is something that I didn't really get into is each character has their own deck of cards that are going to be the cards that you're going to be, drawing from and playing on this conveyor belt that I mentioned. These decks are customizable. So again, I didn't dive into the customization of the player decks, but after playing games or during games I was playing, I was looking at the cards that you could potentially put in the decks and thinking to myself, oh, okay, now that I kind of know the game, I could see how these would be cool. And that's another big thing in this game, like comboing, setting cards up to combo, both in the making sure you can get a lot of energy ejected, and then having the 3 cards in front of you on your conveyor belt that you actually can play on that work together. It makes for some really interesting decisions and really interesting gameplay options. And I think depending on what character you're playing and what your opponent is, and if you're playing 1 versus 1 or 2 versus 2 or free for all, I think you could tailor your deck in such a way that that might optimize your experience in playing the game. A couple of things that were maybe on the negative side. This was, again, a preview copy. Lovely, artwork. You can tell a lot of thought has been put into it. Some of the components I thought were a little bit fiddly. This health reservoir that I was talking about with minions, they come in the form of chips that you're taking off the minions and putting in your reservoir. Our players found ourselves knocking them over quite a bit, and some of the pieces weren't exactly where I think you'd want them to be, but I think that is probably again, preview copy thing more than anything else. And also, we found ourselves, because of the array of options and considerations you had in playing, in setting things up, we did find the game did kind of, not regularly, but fairly often, especially with AP prone players, would slow down as people considered the best way to set up combos. So as interesting as that aspect of the game was, it did come with its own sort of inherent flaws or drawbacks. And so, yeah, I think of the 3 of us, I'm probably the person who has the least experience with MOBA style games. And as I mentioned, with the lore and the way this game apparently is going to be supported, this feels like a game where if you got into it, this could be a lifestyle sort of game. I don't think that will be where I land on this, because I don't have the history of mobile games. That's not necessarily my style of game, but I found this really, really interesting. Again, this card play system was really novel, and it had a lot of the right considerations. There's a lot of give and take, cards that in some situations felt had no effect on the game that I would never play. In other situations, when they comboed with other things, or when I found myself in a certain situation, I thought, oh, okay, now I see the value of this card. So there's a lot of stuff that sort of blossoms as you play it. And again, if you're looking for a game that you can devote a lot of time into, I think this might be a game that will really, really, really appeal to some people. So if you're a MOBA fan, if you're, again, looking for a lifestyle game, if you're looking for a game to really sink your teeth into, both in terms of gameplay and potentially lore and backstory and just general world, I think Trials of Maya is a game that you should at least check out. And again, it'll be on GameFound about approximately a week after this episode is released. So yeah, just a lot of meat on this bone, both in terms of world building and in terms of the gameplay. And if you're at all a fan of skirmish games or MOBA games, I think it'd be good for you to check this out at the very least. So again, that is Trials of Maya, published by Department of Lore.
One quick question, Mark, which is, I'm curious how long it was, because that's always one of my concerns with this genre of board games. I feel like it is a very dense type of video game to condense down to a board game rule set.
Sure.
How long does it end up taking to play?
Yeah, so again, these were like initial plays, and I think they would get faster. In fact, I'm confident it'd be quite faster on future plays. But 1 versus 1 went around 2 hours, and I think you could trim that down probably to 90 minutes would be my guess. Especially, again, this is a game I think clearly it's a game where it will be ideal for someone who's willing to play it over and over again, and then that stuff really gets trimmed down. 2v2 went 3 hours, like nearing on 3:15. And so that did feel like on the long side. Again, this was like a situation where you did more players, more questions, less familiarity per player, if you were to quantify it as such, which I presume would get much shorter upon further plays. I would suspect 2v2 could be 2 hours, 2.5 hours, maybe even less than that. No, I don't know. It's hard to tell, but definitely not super breezy. This doesn't feel like a 60-minute game. If you're looking for a 60-minute game or a 45-minute game, I guess perhaps you could get that one-on-one if you and the other person knew what they were doing. This more feels like a 90-minute situation to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's get into some of the stuff in the middle here. One thing we have to talk about. Callan, you look like you're about to say something.
Nope. I'm good.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was contemplating.
Okay.
I'm sending you the book, though, Callan. I assume that's what you wanted.
Please send me the book.
Yeah.
Actually, I just want to hear the dulcet tones of Hugo Weaving.
Okay.
Is that that's who we said it was?
That's who it was, yeah.
I actually didn't hear a word you said after his name.
You have voice blindness whenever I start talking to him.
That's right.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Okay, before we move on, there's a couple of little things in the middle here that we must talk about. Is we have recently done a draft, not a draft that anyone could win per se, but we asked you at least to tell us who nominated the best entry, who embodied the spirit of the draft best, some of the bigger missions from the draft, and this was our draft of the best games of 2017 for what it's worth. So let's go through some of that really, really quickly. It does seem like overwhelmingly people say that the best entry of the draft was Azul, which makes it all the more tragic that we couldn't get it to number one on the list, but it's hard to say that was my fault.
We tried.
Did we?
We tried. I mean, two of us tried. Two people who have non-distinct voices tried.
Yeah.
I'd say the one with the distinct voice is the one who's submarined that. But
I think it might be worth going through a couple of these. I was just going to go down the list and see if any of them jump out at me. Some of the biggest omissions. Some of these are obviously games we were aware of. It's not like we weren't thinking about stuff like Gloomhaven and Spirit Island, but in my case, at least, I knew that it wasn't going to get very far. But other stuff that I do think that would have been lovely to see on here. Clans of Caledonia, I love that game. Sol, Lost Days of a Star. I was a little surprised that Mark at no point mentioned Lisboa.
Lisboa is never getting on. What are you talking about? Lisboa. You guys.
I think it was worth the conversation. But you're probably right. Lisboa.
Yeah.
Lisboa.
Neelan doesn't know what he's talking about.
That's a game.
Isn't Neelan reading quotes, or is he?
No. Yeah. These are suggestions. These are suggestions for games that could have been nominated, but weren't.
Well, you're reading suggestions, and then you said specifically, "I can't believe Mark didn't suggest."
Well, I was just giving my own color commentary.
Well, just read.
Sorry, if you want to spit in the face of the listener, please, by all means.
Well, either read them or comment on them. But
yeah, it's like he printed out a bunch of things that smarter people than him said, and then he's reading them to us as if they're his own.
That's exactly it. One thing I did think was funny is someone did suggest Exit the Game, Dead Man, and Orient Express. Thank you. I'm very sad that did not make it onto our top 10 of 2017. Who embodied the spirit of the draft best? Overwhelmingly, Neelan.
Wait, you asked who embodied the spirit of the draft best?
Yes. It was important to establish that like I was the only one with any actual... I don't know.
Well, I haven't seen the results. Who's second place?
Well, I mean, second place was Kellen, so I'm not sure. 10% of the vote goes to Mark.
Winner.
I had 10%.
10% of the vote.
Holy cow! Wait, what percentage did you guys get?
I had 65%.
Oh my goodness!
Kellen had the other 25.
Yeah, that's a strong showing. Some could say we won the election.
I'm like the candidate where like their picture is like their realtor picture or something. Like they didn't even have the money like to have like an actual candidate picture.
Okay, as we were going to pick someone that submitted their opinions on our draft as a winner of a, how much money did we say? $50, I think?
It'll be randomized somewhere between 50 and...
No, I don't think that's how that works. I'm randomly picking a name from this list, and the name that I have picked is this one. Your email address starts with a C and ends with a G. You should be expecting an email shortly. At the time you hear this, you should have an email in your inbox. Please reply, and you have won. Okay, Let us move on to the feature topic. And what we're going to do, this was a topic suggestion that was sent into us by Jordan. The genesis of this topic is what old and popular board games on Board Game Geek, if they came out today, would get lost in the abundance of games. They had a couple of suggestions, but I think I'm going to leave those for right now. But the rest of the thought is that, stuff that would get completely lost in the noise of the amount of releases today, which I think is something I think about a lot. One of the things I think that is so interesting about reflecting on games of the past, and something that we do when it comes to the draft we were just talking about a second ago, is that there is this sense of is this a game, despite the fact that it was very important in 2017 or 2016 or what have you, how would this fare if it was to be released brand new today? So what we're going to do is we have on Board Game Geek a list of games that were released more than 10 years ago. So, anything up until 2016 at the latest. And we're just going to go down what Board Game Geek says are the top games released prior to 2017 and see how we think about how they'd fare on the market today. Sound good?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, let's do it. Okay, so the highest ranked game from before 2017 or from 2016 or earlier, depending on how you want to say that.
How do we refer to this era?
This is
pre-BGB era, I think.
Yeah, this is all definitely pre-BGB, which, is...
I was thinking more like in a global context.
Yeah.
That is a global context.
The dark age for board games.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of exactly what that is. I think that there is the first game on the list at least gives you an interesting marker in the timeline.
Before our elections were rigged in the U.S.
Sure. Okay.
Well.
We can go with that. The first game on our list is Pandemic Legacy Season 1. So there is definitely a very notable shift. And then I guess for some context, we might not talk about this game specifically, but Scythe is in this period as well, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about almost a pre-Kickstarter, pre-Legacy. There's a very distinct
but just on the
period
cusp
of
that.
time. Just on the cusp, exactly.
Yeah.
This is the beginning of a lot of industry shift towards Kickstarter, legacy games, all that sort of thing. Okay, so Pandemic Legacy Season 1. I think one of the things I want to sort of open by saying is this is a game I still have in shrink on my shelf. So I am still endeavoring to play Pandemic Legacy for the first time, which does make this very pertinent.
Wouldn't your life be better if you
just threw it away?
Well, if you stop pretending, you know what I mean? Like, why aspire to something that you're never going to be?
That is a valid question. And I think this is honestly true for a lot of board game collecting habits, right? Which is why build up collections of games that I tell myself I'm going to play? And to be honest, this is a thing that extends to a lot of areas of my hobbying, which is I have a pile of books, I have a pile of shows, I have a pile of and I tell myself just so that I can get eternally
Don't tell them about
disappointed.
that pile. Take that one out, Mark.
Which one? The book
No,
pile?
we took it out.
Oh,
So the listeners...
Yeah, I edited it out.
With 65% of the vote, they don't need to know about his collection.
Okay. Wait, hang on.
Yes.
But no, I think it's a valid question. I think that the thing that's funny about Pandemic Legacy is that the specific reason I haven't played it is because it is a commitment to find people that are willing to famously, I think, Mark, you've not finished your Pandemic Legacy campaign,
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah, I think we stopped playing it, I don't know, it must be close to 10 years ago. And I played with people who obviously were in LA because I was living in LA at the time. And it's funny because I was just organizing my collection and I ran into it. And I just sent them a picture of one of the cards because you name your characters whenever one is introduced. And one of them had a very specific, unique, funny name. And so I just sent the picture to the group, having not spoken to some of these people in 5-10 years. And everybody sort of they kind of remembered the character and thought fondly back of it. So,
that's lovely.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I've been thinking about this a lot recently is that there's a group who I mentioned them a few weeks ago, that I more regularly play lighter games with, and Pandemic Legacy has crossed my mind of maybe there's a world where that is a game I play with them. But then I also think something like The King's Dilemma. The King's Dilemma is another campaign style game that I think would sort of work decently well with that group. And there is this question in my head of okay, I actually think King's Dilemma might be the better, more modern version of this style of long-form game. So does Pandemic Legacy have a place in 2026? Mark, do you think that there's a world that you could go back to it and still have a good time with it?
Yeah, I think so. Pandemic Legacy obviously is going to be especially difficult to figure out because of the legacy aspect to it. I think if you caveat it by saying like this is Pandemic Legacy released in a world that legacy games have been released in, but no other, because obviously there's like 2 sequels to this game. I think if you say that this is the world today, but there's no Pandemic Legacies that have ever been released, I think it still does make an impact. I don't think it ever reaches the heights that it did, like where it was the number 1 game of all time for a period. But I do think the Pandemic name itself, the Pandemic brand, lends itself enough cachet and reassurance that the game is going to be solid, which it is. Like, I didn't finish it, but I came to it having played Pandemic, and the sturdy bones of Pandemic are in that game. So I think it would stand out in a world today where legacy games are released with some regularity, and a lot of them are like you hear about them and they're gone. I think Pandemic Legacy, if it was released today, would stick out and would rise to some level of prominence and acclaim. I just don't think that it would rise to the level that it got to, because that like first mover thing was such a big deal when it first came out. I mean, it was not the first legacy game, but it was the first like kind of like big
first big one.
Like a lot of eyes on it sort of legacy game, and really like planted a flag in that respect. So I think it still would be quite popular. I think it would stand out, but not to the level it got to.
I do think like one interesting thing that you touched on is that Pandemic is still very relevant. Like Fates of Fellowship, one of the biggest recent games, very firmly a Pandemic game, even if it's not branded as such.
Yeah.
What side of the like time travel paradoxes are we on here?
Yeah, are we in the 2026 where Pandemic Legacy didn't come out, or the 2026 where it did come out? I think that's up to you to decide.
Well,
we're definitely in the 2026 when it didn't come out, right? That's what we're talking about.
But it's like, because so many of the legacy games also would not exist.
Well, I think that's kind of the...
Right.
That's the thing to evaluate, maybe.
But I would say,
yeah.
I would say you just take out the Pandemic Legacy games, just suck them right out of history.
Suck them out.
Suck them out. Speaking of
People
Neil collection,
and
then just have today all the other legacy games that come out, but now you're dropping in Pandemic Legacy.
I think it would be a huge hit. Maybe not on the order of getting like 4 of them or however 0, 1, and 2 there are.
Yeah.
But I think this is a well they'll go back to.
Like Pandemic Legacy specifically, or
Pandemic Legacy Season 3. Like it's like, you know, kind of like when there's like The Devil Wears Prada 2, and they're like,
enough time passes, and they're like,
we don't know what else to make, so we'll go back to that thing. That's 100% Pandemic Legacy.
I think I think you could be right, but I kind of feel like enough time has passed that I find that hard to believe. But like,
this is all in like the last 10 years. We haven't given up on you.
You can even do like
a
Fellowship Legacy, right? You could do like
honestly, that was the thing I was gonna say. Is like, I could believe that like a Fate of the Fellowship something or other Legacy does come out or something like that.
It's like Lord of the Rings nerds.
Are
starting to grate on me. It's like I was on a road trip, okay, and I brought this up in the Discord, and we were trying to debate the best movies of the last 30 years, or like since 2020 or since 2000s, and they were insistent that Return of the King would be on this list, and it's just like it's not even anywhere near the top like 20.
Wait, are you saying it wouldn't be on the list?
No. 100%. Like, unless you're using the Oscars as your only reference point.
Well, but it is. I mean, it is one of the most Oscars movies ever, isn't it?
That's what he's saying. He's saying unless you're using that.
Well, I mean, why wouldn't you use that at least partially as a metric?
Because if you just ask film critics to like start listing movies, it wouldn't be anywhere near the top 10. Like, it wouldn't even be close. It won a bunch of awards.
Yeah, no, look, I don't think it's like film nerd top 10, but
it's like pop. Again, I'm not saying cultural phenomenon, but it was just like I'm like, There Will Be Blood, No Country for Old Men, In the Mood for Love, and they're like, obviously The Return of the King is number 1, and I'm just like, obviously you watch this every year for Christmas, and like, I can't. Anyway, Lord of the Rings, I read them all. Okay.
Okay, let's move on to the next game, which is on our list. Oh,
speaking of,
yeah. Well, here we go. War of the Ring.
Oh my gosh! I guess I'll just stop talking.
I do think what is very funny about this is that my War of the Ring Collector's Edition that they just recently did a resale of is arriving later this year, so it's definitely especially poignant. Is that relevant to most people? I don't know. I think I might be the first person to say that I think that War of the Ring would struggle in a modern market just because of the type and scale of game that it is. And I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that the board game world certainly is flooded with Lord of the Rings games at this point.
Don't we have like a case of this exact thing? Like, don't we have the example with War of Arrakis?
You know what? But quite a different game. I think that's actually a good point worth talking about, which is that the War of Arrakis is quite a substantially retooled version of War of the Ring. So yeah, I think that there's something to be said for the notion that, like, yes, if you were to release War of the Ring in 2026, it would probably look more like War of Arrakis, which is to say slightly streamed down, slightly faster, some of the kind of the, let's call them thematic edges slightly shaved off.
But imagine we have like a baseline of how well War of Arrakis did recently, right?
Yeah.
But let's say that we are living in a world where War of the Ring didn't come out, and we're just dropping that in to today, knowing how well War of Arrakis did, which is relatively well,
Yeah.
but without the edges shaved off. We have the exact same game. We have War of the Ring 2nd Edition coming out tomorrow. You think it would do as well? You think
that's an interesting question. My gut says, because there's two opposing like things there, right? It's like the Lord of the Rings IP is one direction, and then I do think that the rules grid like makes it like slightly less attractive. So I don't know where that nets out.
You also have the success of the deluxe version being re-released. Like that was, a pricey reprint.
But that strikes me as something that only sold to people that liked War of the Ring. I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I don't know. This is tough.
My guess is it would do well, but not the heights.
Not tough. Again, this is actually pro Lord of the Rings. We've had like 10 good Lord of the Rings games come out in the last 2 years.
Sure.
Like Trick-Taking Game, my Pandemic game, my Trick-Taking Game again. And so I don't think that this stands out. I think that's my point. Of a meaningful way. Yeah,
I think that's exactly my point. I think at the time that War of the Ring comes out, there are not as many Lord of the Rings games. There certainly isn't anything I would count as like this is definitively Lord of the Rings. Because actually, especially if we wanted to be as literal and say this comes out this year, right? Like Fate of the Fellowship is as close to a thematic, all-encompassing Lord of the Rings game as we've had since War of the Ring. So like it's kind of in a tough. I mean, it's tough company. Like to Kevin's point.
That's fair.
I want to believe because I love War of the Ring, but I feel like I have my doubts a little bit.
Speaking
of doubts, first I think big doubts, Terraforming Mars.
Yeah. So I want to say that I have warmed quite a bit to Terraforming Mars in the last year, primarily because I've now been playing it on BGA. I'm still not a huge lover of it, but I have like learned to, after playing it a couple times, like, there's stuff that has revealed itself to me that I find is interesting. That said, I do not think that Terraforming Mars, especially, Terraforming Mars nowadays, you have Terraforming Mars plus like a ton of expansions and prequels and all these like things that people say that you got to play it with the prelude and without this and with all these like kind of maps, stuff like that. I think in a world that has now games like Ark Nova in it and like other big pile of cards, tableau builders or just engine builders of one sort or another, I think Terraforming Mars probably still does well, but I don't think it's anywhere near as highly regarded as it is now.
Are you ready for another hot take? Because I'm just coming in hot every time. I think that we should all collectively agree to not weigh in on this because we are not none of us like Terraforming Mars. None of us have ever understood the popularity of Terraforming Mars. And therefore cannot comment on its ability to entertain and dazzle people in 2026 because it's never dazzled us once.
Right. I do think that there's something that I almost want to
I'm out.
Myself a little. I wanted to check myself before talking about this because I do think it's also become like retroactively cool to hate on Terraforming Mars, generally speaking, in the community. So yeah, I don't know. Does that match how I felt when I first played it? Like Kellen said, I never really felt that strongly about it even at the first time I played it. So I don't know.
Both Terraforming Mars and Ark Nova were games that I was tepid on the first time I played them, or the first couple times I played them, and I've since then played both of them quite a few more times, and I think Ark Nova is a much superior game to Terraforming Mars, even though I've warmed on both of them, but I think they scratch the same relative itch, and I think Ark Nova does it way better.
Okay, next up, Star Wars Rebellion.
I think this falls right in the War of the Rings second edition sort of like thing. Felt like there were a lot of yearly big Star Wars releases around that time. I felt like every year there was a big Star Wars game, and I remember this being one of them, like being like, oh, this is like Star Wars in a box, 1v1, play the entire thing. And it feels like sweeping and epic like the War of the Rings second edition feels to me. But I think in today's market, after there's been so many Star Wars games, I think it would probably, again, be lauded and enjoyed, but it probably would suffer the same ways and excel in the same ways that a War of the Ring release today would.
I just feel like I would like to figure out a way to use data to answer these questions, which is a little bit like, how many ratings is this getting in 2024,
Sure,
5, and 6? And
Yeah.
my guess is this is not getting many. I could be wrong. That's my speculation based on just general people even speaking about it.
And that was actually going to be the point I was going to make. Like, for a game that is currently the 10th ranked game on Board Game Geek, I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say the word Star Wars Rebellion in a board game community podcast in ever. Does anyone ever talk about this game as a game that they still love and play?
Yeah, I do not hear about it for sure. I think part of that is the fact that it takes a long time to play and it's only 2 players, so there's I feel like that limits the number of people who'll be talking about it. But yeah, no, I agree with you. It is a game that is not in the ether.
But to your point though, you just described War of the Ring. I feel like that gets dramatically more airtime.
I don't know. They feel
maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, they feel comparable to me. I mean,
Interesting.
There was a reprint of the deluxe version of War of the Ring, and there has not been apparently a clamoring for more expansions or reprints of Star Wars Rebellion. So yeah, no, I take your point.
I do think actually that there is something specific also with this era of Fantasy Flight games that kind of felt like the biggest thing at the time, and I think to some extent because Fantasy Flight imploded and a lot of those games never got remade, that they just kind of disappeared from the ether.
That's fair.
Okay, moving on. Twilight Struggle.
Yeah, speaking of a game that is not talked about nowadays, when I first got into the hobby, I remember reading articles about Twilight Struggle in non-gaming news sources. They were just talking about do you know what the number one game of all time is? According to this website called Board Game Geek, it is this game about the Cold War. It was this thing oh, I've never heard of that. That's interesting. And so it certainly was talked about then, and obviously much beloved because it was number one of all time for a while. But yeah, I think if Twilight Struggle was released today, it was nowhere near as popular as it was then. I mean, it was one of the games that made the card-driven war games super popular, and now there are quite a few not only card-driven war games, but genres of card-driven war games. So yeah, I think it would do well, but I don't think it'd be anywhere near the heights it reached, and the heights it still is at.
This is going to be the oldest game that we do talk about on this top 10 list. So this is from 2005. Still never played Twilight Struggle. There is still the small part of me that still feels like I ought to try this at some point, just because, if not because it was, like you said, once considered the best.
Yeah, I would say there's plenty of good digital implementations. I think that's a good way to do it. I think, it's worth playing that way. I don't think you really need to sit down and play it for 2.5 hours.
For reals. Yeah. Okay, next game, The Castles of Burgundy.
This one's interesting. Where do you think this would land? It would be released by Feld. It would be a Feld release.
In the Queen City Games list.
Right, that's true. I mean, yeah. Imagine if the first instance of Castles of Burgundy was a City Line Feld 2026.
Dark
interesting thought experiment. That's interesting thought experiment. Do you think it would? I don't think if it's a Queen City game release tomorrow, I think it would be popular, but I think it'd probably be swallowed up by just the whole city Euro thing. I don't know. It's hard. It's hard for me to imagine.
I think that there's also something about this weight of game in 2026 that I don't know. It's hard to say that. Does the medium light Euro game still do as well as it used to, or does it do better? I'm not even sure anymore.
Yeah,
I feel like Feld's on a down.
I think that's definitely true.
But did Castles of Burgundy create the up? And I feel like this had a recent redo that got made a ton of money.
Yeah, for sure. Like a
So
big deluxe version?
I'm high on this, and I think there's a world where it's even more popular now than it was then. And I say that because it's lighter.
Definitely.
Yeah. I cannot imagine that world.
What if it was cat themed?
Okay. I'm warming up to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Okay.
Sure.
Cats
Sure.
in sweatshirts.
Cats of Burgundy. Yeah.
In the coziest coziness. And there's a Care Bear mode where you can interact
perfect.
with.
And solo.
Oh, God.
There probably is in the deluxe version. I wouldn't be surprised.
I want to be the voice of positivity, the voice of the 25% that actually won the election. I'm going to say I am up on Castles of Burgundy.
My inclination is to be down, but that's mostly just because I'm kind of a downer on Castles of Burgundy relative to most people anyway.
I just think that like the midweight light Euro is like such a saturated field that I have a hard time imagining it sticking out today. But I mean, I would hope to be wrong, but I'm a realist.
Okay, moving on to a real game, Through the Ages, a new story of civilization, which in a way is kind of funny because this is a re-release of an older game. Well, 2015, it was a re-release of an older game. But Through the Ages, I mean, God, I don't know that there's anything that I can say that I haven't said before. This is the best game ever made, so...
You are obviously the one who's highest on it and who's played it the most. I have like a game and a half under my belt. Do you think that this game, if it's released tomorrow...
You know what's really, really hard is that, like, I sometimes have to catch myself asking myself if I played Through the Ages for the first time in 2026, would it be a game that would stick in my head? And, like, that's an impossible question to answer. And I think I would honestly be sad to know the answer to that question.
Sure.
Because it is a big, long, heavy game. And those games are harder for me to come to organically these days.
Yeah.
But I think that if I had been corralled through the game in the same way that I was, like when I first played this, and in the same way that I would for someone else, you know, like when I teach this game to someone, it's an event. That's what we're doing for the evening. We're playing Through the Ages.
Yeah.
I'm going to like sort of teach it to you the way that I like to be taught it. We're going to sort of go through it as a long experience. Usually as a 2-player game, like I don't usually like to do an introductory game of this with more players, so it's not like ridiculously long. And there's always the caveat that I will beat you at this game because you cannot win Through the Ages against an experienced person on your first try. It's not going to happen. So like I don't know that it's one of those things that you sort of almost have to be coached through on your first game a little bit, I think, to appreciate. But like, does that work in 2026 organically? I don't know.
But I can also imagine a world where we get like a press release from CGE, although their star has waned a little bit recently. But I imagine a world where you get a press release or an email from CGE saying, you know, Vlada is coming out with a epic civilization game. That still would get you excited. Yeah.
No, absolutely. Like, yeah, on paper, this game coming out, I think that's a good point.
Still excitement inducing.
Yeah, against my better judgment, I'm excited about their stupid Kingdom Come Deliverance board game that I announced, and that's just because it's a big box Vlada game. So like, yeah, absolutely. I'm at least going to pay attention if this gets announced this year. But yeah, very, very hard to say if it's something that would have the same impact on me as it would have back then.
I'm out.
Okay, next up is Great Western Trail.
I mean, in a lot of ways, you got the same sort of thing as I think Through the Ages. This is a Pfister game. Obviously, this has spawned a bunch of sequels, but imagine... I think the easiest way to think of this game is imagine like if Alexander Pfister announced he was going to do a game where the entire board was a rondel set in the cowboy sort of world. I still think it would be something that people would, you know, perk their ears up at. And I still think it's unique enough a system that I think it still would do well today. I don't think it, again, we're just awash in so many games that I just have a hard time believing any of these would do as well, you know, given the lack of a head start chronologically. But I still think it would, in general, be popular and do well.
I think one of the things that we also haven't touched on necessarily in this conversation is, does the game look like this when it comes out in 2026? Does it have these three gentlemen on the front cover glaring at us?
Sure.
I think this is a good one, but again, there's a limit to the amount of Euros that could come out, so it would be competing more heavily than it was at the time.
I think it's still so unique. It did leave a very strong first impression, and I do think that is something that would still stick with people. It is a very satisfying experience the first time through.
I think
certainly. So. Okay, this one, I feel like we have our answer maybe to some extent like already decided for
Built
us.
in.
Yeah. Brass Lancashire. Obviously very, very popular in its more recent reboots.
Yeah, we have basically the answer to this sort of like built in because the original Brass, which this game was based on, came out quite a while ago and kind of like it was well respected, but it was kind of obscure. You know, Brass existed before the re-releases came out and did not hit the heights. So, I mean, if the original Brass came out today, in the original version, in the original, I guess it was published by a company called Fred, I think, or something like that. In the original, like very drab version, there's no chance. The glossing up and the art, the lacquer of paint or the coating of paint that it got, I think made a huge difference. Made an enormous difference.
But Brass was definitely like, obviously, like, still, I hadn't played Brass before like the re-release, right? But it was definitely, I remember a shut up and sit down video about the original version, you know? So like it definitely wasn't like, it wasn't like unknown, certainly.
No. Yeah, it certainly was not unknown. Like it was a Wallace game and it was respected. People liked it. I played it before the new edition by Roxley came out.
Uh-huh.
I just think that like if we want proof that, you know, production is like a huge aspect,
boon.
I mean, we have the answer there. Like if Brass came out in its original plain version, there's no chance. There's no chance. And alternatively, if Brass, which is the number one game of all time today, got released today, I wonder if it would hit number one, but I think it definitely would be up there. I think people would like it quite a bit. But yeah.
Wait, it's funny because you're taking the exact opposite conclusion. You're saying like we know relatively for a fact that it would not hit because it didn't hit previously and it did hit now.
Yeah, I'm saying the original like brown version of it, the like non-souped up edition, would not hit.
I have gotten tired in this episode of playing the foil, but I do have to disagree with you again.
Okay.
Which is to say that like, I think you're speaking a little bit like Brass and Age of Industry were both super well respected when I entered the hobby, like as games. These were like talked about as like, it was kind of like play Power Grid, and then if you want to level up, you know, you're going to be playing Brass and Age of Industry.
I think I just like maybe missed that era where they were in vogue.
And I'm not saying I was in some area. So all I'm saying is, to me, like releasing these new versions just proves how bona fide the gameplay is, which like it will shine through and it will make it. It's so good. But like I'm not like strongly disagreeing with you.
Yeah, I get
you started the sentence. We obviously know the answer to this, and then you proceeded to say exactly the opposite of what I thought you were going to say.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, I would not have considered Brass or Age of Industry in the same class as the way people were talking about Power Grid back then. Power Grid for me, like back then, was like you have to play Power Grid. Like it is a staple of like the interesting economic or heavy-ish economic whatever game, whatever style. And for me, in the circles I was running in, like Brass and Age of Industry were like, these are also really good, but like much more obscure. Like, for me, it was not as you got to try these sort of things. They were like, oh, these are also really good, but like the percentage of people who I knew about them, or the rate at which I got people talking about or reading about Brass at the time or Age of Industry was quite low. But maybe I had a unique experience, and I take your point as well. Like these were certainly lauded back then. There was nobody saying these were bad games even back then.
Oh yeah, the final game that we're going to talk about, the 10th game on this list of modified top 10, is Seven Wonders Duel.
Yeah, we're certainly in the age of a lot of duel games. Was Seven Wonders the one that kicked it off? It probably was, right? The whole dualization.
Oh, you know, that's interesting. I mean, it's one of the first that I can remember. Certainly just from this, you know, having Duel in the title. Like, you know, I think 2-player versions of games, there have to be some that like.
There was Agricola. There's a 2-player Agricola. There's been a bunch of 2 players, but I think like.
But I think, well, certainly I think as far as like Cathala is like doing the dualified version of like games, which I think is very much just a him thing. But maybe Seven Wonders Duel might be the first one of those. Certainly.
Yeah.
I like Seven Wonders Duel a lot. I do think that like it's not exactly relevant, but like the data point of Duel for Middle Earth, which I think is a slightly twisted but still mostly the same game that still hits. So I mean, honest to goodness, might be my favorite game from last year. Like I think it's still excellent. I could easily see a world, and some of this we do have to like caveat with like, you know, there's the Lord of the Rings element in that, to our earlier point, but like I still think of
Nealon agrees with all my points about the Lord of the Rings movie. That's what he's saying.
That definitely none of those points. I do think that there is something to be said with just kind of how rock solid like the core mechanic of this has kind of borne out to be. I know it's not necessarily to everyone's taste. I think it's excellent. I think it's also like still fairly novel. I still think that there is something kind of still lovely when you lay out that weird grid of cards of face up and face down cards to people and are like, oh, what is this? What is this that we're doing? And it still feels pretty novel, and like it hasn't been replicated like into like feelings like something that's just been done a billion times before. Very tense back and forth, very, very, very interactive in the sense that like it is just constantly evaluating what move is going to win you or lose you the game at every turn. Yeah.
I know we've just gone over the top 10 games according to the BGG ranking that were released 2016 and prior. But before we go, I want to ask Kellen about game number 11. I'm curious because he was very, very high on it when it was released. This is Scythe. Kellen, what do you think Scythe being released today? I'm genuinely curious. Like, do you think it still is as
First
popular?
of all, the art would be made with AI. Gotcha. Okay, Tracegate, hashtag remember forever. I think this would do well. I think this would do great. I do think that we've opened up the aperture on allowing a little bit more direct conflict. And so I do think it would be called out a little bit more to like pick a side, and like we'd be okay with the more comedified version of this. But it kind of sits in a weird middle ground that I think was more fine here and is not fine anymore. I don't know what that's based on, but I think this would do great. I haven't heard anyone. Have you heard anyone talk about Scythe in like 4 years?
No.
I think it definitely is another good example of a game that kind of went over a cliff a little bit. But I also think, like, kind of similar to Terraforming Mars, I do think it became a game that was very cool to hate on.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that's, very hard to like make it an objective like that.
And I was there leading the hate. But I hated it before it was cool.
You loved it before it was cool too. I wonder, like, in a world where like Stegmaier has released a bunch of very souped up, nice looking games like Tapestry, like a world with Tapestry with like all these big chunky pieces, and that's sort of like been like the novelty maybe has worn off, or the shine on that has maybe like gone off a little bit. I wonder if Scythe being released today would like, because that was such a big thing of it, like the beauty of the production was such a huge draw of it. I wonder if the shine has worn off of that a little bit, and if it would hit the same heights.
Yeah. I think that like the thing that we were talking about earlier, like this being like a very early Kickstarter success, right? That plays into a lot of it. Like you hadn't seen a game with production values like this before, like to some extent. Like it was just, it was kind of novel in that sense.
It almost felt transcendent.
Absolutely, yeah. I think one of the things that's also like at least interesting about Scythe's place in the market in 2026 is there is an expansion that just came out. I have not played it yet, but there's like this 2-player Duel of Melloc, which is I'm very excited to get around to playing, because the idea of taking the game that I really, really love and condensing it into 45-minute 1v1, like that's cool. That's a neat idea. So there might be like some meat in those bones there still. But yeah,
you can crunch on, because these are the words we use to describe board games.
Yes, crunchy meat.
The meat on the bones turns into crunchy cereal. It's coated in Kellogg's. That game is coated in Kellogg's. Look at that. We said it here first.
That's going to become board game vernacular by the end of the week.
Coated in cornflakes, actually, is probably better now that we think about it.
We got to refine this.
Working it.
Yeah.
Okay, that is going to do it for this topic. Thank you all for listening. I'd be very curious to hear people's thoughts on this. Like, if there are any standout games from this period of time, like anything that we've spoken about that you kind of have like strong opinions on like whether or not you think it would succeed or fail, like I'd be very curious to hear those in our Discord, which you can of course get to at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. If you're not familiar with what Discord is, it is a chat room. We're all there. We're all hanging out. We're all talking board games. A very huge, lovely community of people also talking board games. It can be intimidating. Just stick around, listen. You'll have a great time. That is our Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Otherwise, you can reach us on our email or social media. Thank you for listening. Thank you, as always, to Heart Society for our intro and outro music, What's in Your Mind, Kid. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
What do you think I'm going to say here?
Okay.
What?
Because you always remind everyone.
Why do you keep bringing this up, Neil?
Oh
This-
my
we keep
God.
trying to take
Ridiculous.
this out. All right, goodbye, everybody.